to recover from the coronavirus pandemic. This package, he said, will be aimed at workers, farmers and middle class who've suffered during the lockdown. All right, in fact, let's open this up. We have Sumit Peer, industrialist, joining us live on the broadcast. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist and economist, is also joining us live. Dr. Apurv Ranjan Sharma, investor, will be joining us shortly as well. Hemant Kanoria, chairman, Strai Investment Finance, Strai Infrastructure Finance Limited, will also be joining us shortly. And Yoginder Kapoor, economist, is also joining the panel in just a bit. Let me begin with you first, Mr. Mukherjee. Your first, assessment of the announcement which was made last night. What did you make of it? The contents of the PM's speech, and of course, his decision to allocate 10% of our GDP to this stimulus. That's a 20 lakh crore amount.
I think it's a game changer in no uncertain terms. What happened is the entire narrative had been bogged down with details of the coronavirus, its pros and cons, the way several sections were reacting to the lockdown and so on. And in this short speech, we have all been focused towards the future. That's one. Secondly, the quantum of the package is in keeping with his, I think it was tongue-in-cheek, because he's been a great incrementalist all this while. And suddenly he says, okay, no more incrementalism, we're going for quantum leaps. This is extremely welcome. We haven't seen this in the Modi government in the last 6 years. If he is going to make quantum jumps, he's going to have to change everything. And he's also pointed out that he probably will by naming laws, land, labor.
And do you believe that's necessary, Mr. Mukherjee? Because yes, aid is needed in terms of financial stimulus, but if it's accompanied by reform, then that could truly be a game changer at the end of the day. Because, yes, there is adversity, but, there's opportunity as well. And turning an adversity into opportunity is the hallmark of a great leader, and perhaps this is the time now for Mr. Modi to seize the opportunity. People are comparing this with 91, when game-changing reforms were effected. Perhaps this can also be an opportunity for Mr. Modi to recreate 91 in 2020, if done correctly, Mr. Mukherjee.
My view is that with most of the world, the developed world, including the United States and most parts of Western Europe, going into recession and cannot in any case hope for much more than 1 or 2% growth, even if they were, in the pink. What happens is that India has always been a domestic market. And insofar as it continues to do that, it has every chance of riding out this couple of years that are coming up, which may be turbulent, and going on to new things. At the same time, it gives you great leverage if you are going to deal with companies that want to move to India from China. It's no point, beggaring yourself over concessions, because then India on the whole is going to make nothing out of an Apple or so forth coming to India. What has to happen is they have to find it desirable, and the way that will happen is because of our own consumption in the domestic market. So I think, while he loves his slogans, local and vocal and so on, but I think what he's very cleverly done is told us where our pot of gold lies, and it is in the domestic market.
Okay, Mr. Mukherjee, stay with us. Sumit Peer, let me get you in at this point, and we have, of course, more panelists also joining us as we speak. Sumit, you were talking earlier when we, of course, came to you about an hour back first on this story about the timing of this announcement as well. Do you believe that the timing is very appropriate, because now we're beginning to open up. Now economic activity is beginning to resume once again. You know, there were some who said that this announcement should have happened much earlier, but you believe that this announcement is appropriate because of the fact that it's this stimulus and these reforms are happening when industry is opening up, when the lockdown is slowly ceasing.
You know, you're absolutely right. Now, what we discussed earlier, it is all about the timing. There are a couple of things about the timing. First of all, now lockdown is opening up and states are given in lockdown 4.0, states will have a lot of control, or the governing control, I would say. Now, this is the time when we have been always talking of a 10 trillion economy. Now, there is an option, we just roll out the money. Second is we roll out the money and come up with major reforms. Because that is what the country needs. We are 1.3 billion people across the length and breadth of the country. We have suffered. We all want to come back. We all want to grow. There will be no political opposition at this point of time. So this is the best time when the economy is opening up. Bring a package, which is money. What did the Prime Minister say? Land, labor. You know, land, labor, Kisan, middle class, MSME. He talked about everybody. So what he hinted at is path-breaking reforms. So it is a package. Otherwise, you know, the package is approximately $300 billion. $300 billion can't be a relief package. So it has to be a comprehensive package to restart, reboot the economy. And if you talk of the timing, there is nothing better than that. And let me tell you one other important point. Talking politically, Uday, there are more than 4 years, approximately 4.5 years to a next election. So you have all that time to roll it out, to make it work brilliant, and obviously then take the credit for it. So you have a 4 years of clean rundown. I mean, the time is on your side. The opportunity is on our side. And with businesses moving from China, the reliability quotient of China going down all-time low, where people do not want to do business with China. And this time around, Uday, it's a people's movement. It's not driven by some governments or some policies. The people, Jan Sadharan, General Manav, across the countries does not want to do business with China. What is the second best option? We are the option, but our agility, our ability to act fast, make those packages is the key. What I expect is path-breaking reforms. It's not money which will be doled out like US, money hitting our bank accounts. That's not going to happen. But what we have seen, some indications are already coming from Yogi Adityanath in UP when we talk of the labor laws and all. We can see more of that coming. And as Madam Sitharaman is doing 3 days of briefing or 3 days of PCs, that means a lot is coming on our table. They are addressing sector by sector. And what Bridges Wright just now reported, EGO meeting. So these guys will be meeting after that, because they are the people who will be involved in a lot of implementation. So they will have a lot of questions, answers. So the PM is also meeting them, addressing them. Their questions, answers will be handled. What is the thought process? How are we going to implement it? Why do we need to implement it? What is the time? And Uday, I think this is our time. This is our opportunity to set the base
and we're also
set the ball rolling for a 10 trillion economy.
We're also,
because we are 5% or 10% less than Chinese population. Why not we go for 10
getting
trillion?
information through our
This
sources.
is our time, sir.
We're also getting information through our sources, Yoginder Kapoor, that today's announcement is likely to focus on the MSME sector. So, we're going to be, and Apoor Ranjan Sharma, if you're there with us as well, please keep your video on, sir, because we're live on the broadcast, so keep your video on, and I'll come to you in just a second. But Yoginder Kapoor, coming to you now. Today's announcements, sources tell us, are likely to be on the MSME sector first, and then there are going to be announcements perhaps tomorrow and day after as well, focusing on the other sectors. What do you make of the government deciding to address the MSME sector first, and then you can also follow up by your analysis and your comment to this 20 lakh crore amount that has been sanctioned by the government, which is certainly has crossed industry's expectations?
Well, Uday, we first need to appreciate the contribution of the MSME sector to our Indian economy. The fact is that it contributes 50% of our GDP. When we say 50% of GDP, then it means that it's already playing a prominent role. And we have to understand that the lifeline for a MSME business is credit. Ultimately, they don't have that very high reserves with them at all times, that they can rely on their reserves and keep on with their working capital and carry on with their operations. Here the situation was that they have been waiting for this government support for a long time. We were anticipating that this should have come in sometime mid of April, that they could have easily planned their projections for how to carry on with their business. Now, the point is, it's very important. Now, while the credit will flow from the bank to the MSME, it's very important that we have to understand that the banks also need to be very careful while making the funding to the MSME sector. That MSME sector funding should be based on the sector-wise analysis of the businesses, based on the demand that they will generate over a next 12-month to 24-month period, because ultimately we don't want to get into a situation that it's resulting into a situation that there is no demand, and yet the banks have funded to a particular SME or MSME, and it's putting strain on the bank's balance sheet, ultimately by way of resulting into defaults or NPAs. So my point is that the banks will have to carry out the funding in a very, very crafted and careful manner. And going forward, I think it's very important that this support is coming at the right time now, and that's how I'd like to conclude on that.
Okay, let me bring in, in fact, Mr. Apoorv Ranjan Sharma, Dr. Apoorv Ranjan Sharma also at this point. Dr. Sharma, your expectations from this announcement. We do know, of course, the host of announcements will be 20 lakh crore rupees. That's the amount sanctioned by the government. What are your expectations? Which do you believe are the sectors which most need it? And what are you awaiting?
See, my expectation from, if you see the yesterday's announcement by Mr. Modi, he is seeing clearly this as an opportunity to take India ahead of others. And he's seeing this as a very good opportunity where he can, he's telling that, there is MNCs which were earlier big, today the big names, they were small names before. He's clearly indicating that we have to create local brands. We have to create local good startups which can become international global brands. So my expectation from this budget, particularly this package, is also to get some stimulus for the startups, because there is an announcements of ACT grant, there is announcement how through SIDBI there is some kind of grant available. Even discussions are on from the DPIIT level that some 3 months grant can be, because many of the startups which are, their businesses are impacted at the moment because of the lockdown. So since the revenues are impacted, so their funding plan is completely disturbed. So they may need some kind of grant support from the government at this point of time. And there is UK also recently announced, big stimulus fund, largely to support the startups who are getting impacted because of this. There are startups who got a upsurge in the business. Of course, they don't need this, but there are sectors which are seriously impacted by because of this lockdown. So those kind of startups definitely need some kind of support from the government in terms of brands, in terms of some kind of relaxation in their taxations, so that they can compensate the losses which they have incurred during this time. So that is one thing we definitely the industry is looking at them from that.
Right, that's an interesting point that you're making, and the fact also is that it's a very holistic, picture of the government and the current government's outlook that has also been given, Mr. Yogendra Kapoor, by the Prime Minister last evening. Do you also believe that these announcements need to be accompanied by sweeping reform as well? And what are those reforms?
Right. See, when we talk of reform, then we have to understand that we are talking, or rather discussing, about the changing of the entire ecosystem. Now, you see that reform, it relates to the land reforms, the labor reforms, the regulatory mechanisms that this country is already undergoing and facing with, and then lastly, the financial reforms in terms of the adequate credit being available to the respective industry. My point is that here is an opportunity that wherein, we can really fill in the gap. I mean, we see already a situation that there is a anti-China, impression that is getting created throughout the world that this is a country on which they cannot rely any further in terms of putting all their eggs in one basket in terms of their supply lines. So here is an opportunity for India wherein we can really, you see, here it's a situation that we cannot only focus from the export point of view, even from the imports point of view. If we are able to create an ecosystem wherein we can reduce the reliance of our imports and then create the respective industry in our country in such a manner that our import reliance gets reduced, which ultimately helps our economy in terms of employment generation and the revenues to the government. So my point is, here it is a situation wherein both the center and the state will have to work in close coordination and use this as a great opportunity going forward.
So,
yes, Dr. Sharma, go ahead.
One or two things which I want to highlight. Yesterday when I was hearing his speech, he said this is a time for quantum jumps, not for incremental jumps. India can definitely replicate what's happening in China in terms of manufacturing hubs and all by providing the incentivization and all those stuff. But quantum jumps are possible only when we have a very strong startup ecosystem in India. You see in China today, Greater Bay Area is formed between Hong Kong and large part of China, where they have only startups focus. So when you are talking about the 1991 reform movement, at the moment, a lot of people are saying this is the time which is like 1991 reform movement. Then this is also the time when we will request Mr. Modi to think through how India can become a startup nation. How then India, today we are third biggest startup economy in the world, but how can we become world #1 startup economy? This is also a time to provide incentivization to investors, provide incentivizations to ultra HNIs from outside India to invest in startups in India, so that our economy, startup economy, can become very soon startup also become one of the strong pillars for this economy. At the moment, which is still a very small contribution, but the important thing is that this is something which is futuristic. Yesterday we also heard him saying that our biggest strength is the demographic dividend. The demographic dividend of the youngsters. A lot of professionals, young professionals from all over the world, they've come back to India now. This is a time for them to, also think maybe they can do a good startup. They can also create some great innovative business which can transform the economy. Somebody can create something like, Amazon type company. There are so many, but they have seen the world. This is a time when all of them come back to India. A lot of them come back to India. So this is also a time, maybe some kind of, reforms to be done in terms of startup stimulus package, which basically can boost the startup economy, and India can become the startup nation, which can, probably become the leader in that space. This is the right time to think about that also.
Right. I think Gautam Mukherjee wanted to come in on the point you were raising about the fact that this is going to be a quantum leap and not just a minuscule leap. Yes, Mr. Mukherjee, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, my view is that first and foremost, you need to get the economy running again. And that is largely a function of demand. Now, you may pay companies to sort of, get some liquidity into their system